Well, welcome back. Hopefully you watched the first video of making this forge that's right behind me. Didn't really go into any explanation on that video, just the basics of building this thing. And today I thought I would discuss a little bit about this forge, what inspired me to do it, and some basic tools that I wound up probably needing to do any of this blacksmithing stuff. So let's jump into it. So if you watched the first video, you saw that I'd cut this out of a 25-gallon propane tank. And that old propane tank had lived, its life as a propane tank, and then I bought it for like $2-3 at a yard sale. It had the old style valve on it and all that, and they wanted to get rid of it. Well, I turned it into this rocket stove about 3-4 years ago. And you can see the inner liner and then the outer liner. And this has clay down in it to try and keep the heat building up. So it built that nice rocket, sound that you get out of a rocket stove. Get that inner lining really hot. And this thing worked really well, put out a lot of heat. The one thing I didn't like about it was this little burn chamber. You constantly had to feed this thing. And I didn't like the sparks coming out all the time. So I built this little door. And you can see on the bottom it's open down here. So it could still suck as much air as it wanted. But for the purpose that I was using it for, I wanted to put it in this room that I use as a reloading room. Be able to fire it up, walk away for an hour or two, come back and the room would be warm and I could go to reloading. Well, this thing, you have to feed it constantly. So it really didn't work out real well for my purposes. It did put off a lot of heat, and you could, if this was flat, you could have put a frying pan up there and cooked whatever you wanted on it, but it just didn't work real well for what I had wanted out of it. So I just found this down on my scrap pile, brought it up, cut that notch out of it, and used it for the outside framework on this little forge. Now the inside, these pieces, I actually went and purchased some steel. I was going to use that heavy channel iron there, and I got to looking at it, and I could have got by with almost paying nothing for this forge, but I went and bought these pieces of metal. They're 1/4 inch thick. These pieces here are 5/16, and I had this left over from some other project, so I just threw them in there. Just barely had enough to do both sides. And this is an old mainline, a steel mainline. If you look real close, let's go look at this piece that's over here. You can find it. Right here you can see it's that rolled, that old way they used to make pipe. I don't know where I got this from, but I got it for free. And I've got another 10 feet or so of it around. It's, I'm guessing 3/16 maybe inch thick. It's a little thicker than 1/8 inch. And so I just use that for the air tube coming in. Now there's one thing right off the bat I would have done different. And that's on the bottom here. This, I cut this pipe off as you've seen in the first video, and then just used half the pipe to feed air in. And there's only half a pipe there. If I was to do this again, I would have cut this propane tank and used the full pipe through here. But it seems to be working okay the way it is. I still, if I can't get enough airflow down the road, I may cut the bottom out of this propane tank and weld the other piece of pipe that I have left over back in there so we get more airflow. Now this blower, I'm not really sure where I got this. It might have been either from a yard sale for a couple bucks, or I kind of think it was given to me when an old buddy of mine had passed away. I think his widow may have gave me this, but I'm not real sure. It's been sitting in my shed for quite a while. But It's a little small blower, but it actually seems to work pretty good for this application. And, you know, nothing fancy about it. You can tell from the plug this is an old timer. But it's quiet and it works really well. You know, I wish I had a hand crank to throw on her hand crank blower. But, you know, this I just had sitting around, so I decided to use it. After the first video, after the beta test, I spent about another hour and found some old angle iron down there. Some was down in my scrap metal pile, this stuff was. These I had left over from something else, and I just used those. The wheels come off of an old rototiller somebody gave me 20 years ago. It's just been sitting in my junk metal pile. Went and stole the wheels off of it. And just kind of built some legs. And, you know, threw a handle on here so I wasn't grabbing the blower. And just pick it up and roll it around. And if you look close, I got that handle incredibly crooked when I did that. I was in a big hurry to get this thing done. I just wanted to throw it together and give it a try to see if I even wanted to hassle with this. You know, I didn't want to spend a huge amount of time and money on a forge, not knowing if I'd even like doing this blacksmithing type stuff. And so I just wanted to throw something together real quick and easy. And altogether, to the beta point in the last video, I had about 4 hours into it. And then the legs and the wheels ate up about another hour. So I've got about 5 hours, and I'm just guessing I've got $50 worth of metal. If I add up all those 1/4-inch pieces that I threw in there, I might have 50 bucks into it. The other thing I knew right off the bat, after making that little teepee holder, if you've watched the video about the toilet paper holder I made, you know, everybody kind of got worked up that I was beating on the back end of my vise in there. It's got a little anvil on the back of it, which doesn't amount to much. And I went looking all over locally for an anvil. Couldn't find one. So I found this little guy on Amazon. I'll throw a link below. One thing I forgot to mention, this little anvil is not hardened, so it can dent fairly easy. It's just cast iron. So keep that in mind. This is definitely a beginner's anvil. Also, a cheap set of hammers. Now, these aren't going to be lifelong hammers, I don't think. But, you know, for starting out, I didn't want to spend a ton of money on this until I figure out, is this something I really want to do? So I think there was 5 hammers in a set, a couple ball peens, this thing, what's this, a cross peen, I think is what that's called. And then a regular sledgehammer, a little 3-pound sledgehammer, and something else. I don't remember what the other one was, but I'll throw a link in the description below. It's a pretty cheap set of hammers to get started. This anvil, I don't remember, it was like mid-50s for that. It's, I think, a 55-pound anvil, and for what I'm doing right now, it's fine. It's too low to the ground, but that's the tallest block of wood I could find around right now. When I'm able to get back out in the woods, when the snow melts, I will get cut a longer piece of wood so this thing sits a little higher. Right now it's too low. I'm constantly bending over trying to use that thing, so it works good. The only thing I wish was different is this come out to a little bit sharper point out here for bending, but you know, for 50 some bucks, it's not bad at all, especially for getting started. Now, if I was doing this to try and make money at making stuff, which I don't know who in the world would buy what I've already made, because it's just terrible looking. But if I was trying to do this more professionally, I would get a much bigger anvil than that thing. Maybe down the road I'll find one at a yard sale or an auction or something. But right now, this one's working okay. And like I said, link in the description below to the hammers and that anvil. The other thing I needed was a pair of tongs, and I just bought these off of Amazon. I know I could have built some, but I wanted to get started with this, and so I just bought a set. I figure what I've got into this, if I want to sell it on Craigslist, if I decide I don't like it, I can get my money back out of all this, and plus a little bit, you know, somebody will buy that forge. if I decide I don't like it. So far, I'm really enjoying it. And what's left in here is some coal. And after the first video, I added a few more holes further out. Only had them back in this area before. I added some more, and I still may add some more out this way. There's one more thing I'm going to do to this thing, is add a piece of plate in here in this area with a lip around it, so I can scrape coal back and push and used unburned coal out here and push it in as I need it, or pull it back out of the way when I don't. So that's something I'm going to do down the road at some point. But you know, right now I'm just having fun playing with this. The one thing I have not tried yet is just a wood-fired fire in here to see how hot it gets, to see if it's hot enough to do anything with metal or not. So I may try that later in the video. We may just build a wood fire in here and see how hot that actually gets. Unfortunately, I don't have a way to measure that heat, but you can pretty much tell from when you stick iron in there how hot that is, whether it's going to work or not. So anyway, that's the basics of that little forge. And the other thing I did was down here in the back, right at the bottom, this thing kind of plugs that pipe coming through. But down there in the bottom, I left about a 1/4 inch, maybe 1/2 inch gap, so some air blows through here to help cool this back plate off. That's one thing I was really worried about, was this thing getting so hot that either that pipe melted or this melted. I'm not real worried about that stuff. There's plenty of heat sink on that. But so far, even when I've got a really hot fire going right up against this, the backside of this never even gets red. So pretty happy with that setup. Now let me say, I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to blacksmithing. I just decided to do this for something fun and to try my hand at it. I've seen some videos of guys blacksmithing some tools and some really neat handle pulls, stuff like that. I decided, hey, I want to kind of give that a try. So I thought not spending a lot of time and a lot of money on this, it's a good way to get my hands involved in it, see if I like it, and see if I want to go from there. Unfortunately, I don't have a place indoors to use this thing yet with a suction to suck the smoke out and everything, so I just do it out in front of the shop. And you know, like this morning, it's about, I don't know, 20 degrees out here this morning, pretty cold this morning. So it's a little nippy to be out here hammering around on steel, but you know, it's also kind of nice at the same time. You don't get overheated from that thing gets really hot. Now the one thing I'll say is the outside of that thing, the actual propane tank, never gets too hot that if you put your hand on it, it's going to burn you. You can put your hand on for like maybe 4 or 5 seconds before it starts getting warm enough you want to take your hand off. So I'm pretty happy with that, the way that turned out, that it's I've got enough heat sink there that it's not going to melt or get too hot on the outside of that thing. So if you bump up against it, it's really not that hot. It's warm, but it's not going to burn you. Now the other thing, before I built this, I started looking online at mainly videos and then reading some forums, and there was so much contradictory information about what to do with a forge. And I started this 3 weeks ago, and I got so flustered with it, I just kind of put it on hold until this last weekend. I just decided I'm going to do this. I'm going to build something, and we'll just see if it works. Because there was so much information that you needed a refractory material in the bottom of these if you're using a propane tank and blah, blah, blah. And then other guys were like, no, if you put some other metal in there, it's fine. And then I started looking at other forges, that more professional looking forges. Some of them had refractory, some didn't. So I decided, heck with it. I'm just going to build this thing and see what happens. If it melts down, oh well, then I'll know I have to use some kind of refractory material in there. And even the information on what you should use for refractory material was so contradictory from site to site. So I just said, heck with it, let's just build something and give it a go. So I'm thinking, let's build a wood fire in this thing and see how hot it actually gets. I've got some fairly dry red fir or Doug fir, and we'll throw some of that in there and see how hot this fire gets. I'm going to cut it in pretty small hunks so it gets going pretty quick. And if you watch the first video and probably in this video, you'll see me use some sawdust. That's got a little bit of diesel mixed in with it. I use it to start fires in my shop stove all the time. Just dump a little bit of that in there with some wood, and it burns for quite a while. Makes a nice fire. I tried it in the house, but the little can I had it in, every time you opened it, the whole house started smelling like diesel, so I just use it in the shop now. And it works really good for starting this thing. Put a little bit of that in there, get it going, just enough to where it's starting to pop and crackle, then start that fan and away it goes. So let's build a little fire in this thing and see how hot a wood-fired forge can get, or at least how hot this one's going to get. Before we build the fire, there's one other thing I would change if I was doing this again. I would try and find something, make these just a little bit higher, a little bigger tank or something, or just weld a couple 2-inch pieces of flange up here, and make this firebox area a little deeper. These pieces of metal here are, I don't know, 3 inches, a little over 3 inches wide. And it's good enough for what I'm probably going to do with this, but if I was trying to build much of anything, I think I would make these a little bit deeper so you get more of a nice bed of coals here to use. But other than that, it's working really well. Like I said, for what I'm going to be using it for, it's probably fine. Now, I would love to use some hardwood for that thing, but we just don't have any hardwood in this area. You know, I use my scraps from my woodworking projects in there once in a while, but, you know, Doug firs and tamarac's about the best firewood we've got around this area. Maybe some juniper. It smells really good when it burns. That's about all I can say about it. Creates lots of ash. Go take these and cut them up on the chop saw and throw them in the forge. Even though it's only about 20 degrees out here this morning, it's starting to warm up pretty good right now, but it's still pretty chilly. Got quite a few songbirds coming back, so spring must be close. Try and get as much of this coal out of here as we can. Don't want to taint our results. And this is the first time I've ever used coal for anything. And come to find out, it's actually really hard to find coal in this area. I'd never really thought about it before until I went to look for some. And everybody gave me looks like I was a three-headed monster. What do you mean coal? What do you want coal for? Then when I said what I wanted it for, oh, you're wanting to be like that TV show. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Forged in Steel, Forged. Anyway, it's evidently some show that I haven't seen. And Armed Steel? I don't know. Some Forged. Boy, I don't remember. Some show, reality show about forging weapons. I'm going to have to look it up after everybody mentioned it. But yeah, this coal, the only place I could find it was actually Tractor Supply, which we don't have one anywhere close to us. It's about a 2-hour drive. But we had to go over and do some shopping anyway. And there's like 5 of these stores, 4, I don't remember, in the Boise area. I'd never been to one before. And only one of them, one of the stores in a little town outside of Boise a ways, is the only one that had coal. Now this is anthracite coal, and I bought it not knowing which coal you're supposed to use, if there's any difference between coals. And evidently, after getting back and reading about it and watching a couple videos, anthracite's probably not the best coal to use for a forge. It starts with a B. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but nobody around carries it, so if I want to use coal, it's going to be anthracite. I did find one place over in the Boise area that, according to one site, they carry that other type of coal. It was kind of funny. They sell coal and headstones. I thought that was just kind of an odd combination. So this is just some sawdust with a little diesel. And this last batch I made, I got a 2.5 gallon pail I usually keep this stuff in. I didn't put quite enough diesel in it. Last time I got too much diesel in, and this time I didn't get enough. And so it doesn't start as good as some of my batches have. I don't have a real set ratio. I just kind of, that looks good. This last time, I don't think I actually had enough diesel in my jug. I just dumped in what I had, and it's just not quite enough. And of course, while I was at this Tractor Supply outfit, I had to pick up some of these cute little buckets they had. Yeah, we'll try that. Have a couple more just on for good measure. The other thing I found out, you can stick, this is my little fire poker, I need to bend an end on it, but I can stick it up beside this outside and inside metal, and it really doesn't get all that hot, surprisingly. I mean, you wouldn't want to grab it, but it doesn't really get that overly hot. I found with this sawdust, I can apply air to it fairly quickly. That's another thing I really need to add to this forge is a switch, so I quit having to plug this thing in all the time. Now this is probably going to take a while with this wood to get up to any kind of temperature. You have to build a nice bed of coals in there before this is going to be usable. If anything, it makes a great barbecue pit. Come out and roast some hot dogs. Okay, now that that's going, I know this is going to take a while. I'll get my phone out and we'll see what time it is. Can't read that. It's 9:35. So we'll give it maybe 20-ish minutes and then come back and check on it and see how we're doing. I'm probably going to have to add some more wood before then. 9:59. I did throw a couple pieces of wood on here, and I kind of forgot about it, and it pretty much burnt everything up while I was in the shop. So looks like we may have to start this process again. One thing I found out, this wood's way more sensitive to the amount of airflow than the coal. I've got this shut down about as low as I can get it with my draft control for the fan, and it's still almost too much. But at least it got the metal all nice and warmed up. Okay, so it's about 10:04, 05, somewhere in there. This looks like it's getting nice and toasty, lots of hot coals down there. So I'm going to try a couple different pieces of wood. This is some spring steel. I think it's about 5/8 of an inch diameter. I was bending around on it yesterday. With the coal fire, it got plenty hot enough. I'm curious to see if this will even get red at all in this fire. And then a piece of 3/8 mild steel. Trying to get it down in here in these coals. I see one thing with the wood fire is there's not that nice base to stick stuff in to get it nice and hot. So I don't know if you call it coke. Again, I don't have any clue what I'm doing. But we'll see if this gets anywhere hot enough to so we can do anything with these pieces of metal. I'm going to turn the air up just a little bit to this. Like I said, this wood is way more sensitive to airflow than the coal. And I think if you use wood for forging, you're going to have to be right on top of it, feeding it. The coal, boy, it burns for a long time. The other thing I'll say about the coal, that anthracite, is, I build a little wood fire like this, not quite this big, but just a few chunks of wood. Then I throw the coal on top of it because it will not light with just the sawdust mixture. It wants to, but it really doesn't get going. So I throw a few pieces of wood on there and it gets going. It takes the forge at this temperature outside about 20 minutes before you can use it with the coal. But that's okay, as long as you plan ahead. And this has been in for 2 minutes. We'll see what it looks like. It has a little tint of red to it, but it's a long ways to go. It's been burning about 30 minutes. And this is hot enough. You really wouldn't want to put your hand on it. It's radiating some heat. If you did put your hand on it, it's not going to give you like a 3rd-degree burn. It's not going to feel real good. But out here, it's just barely warm at all, out towards the front end of this. Now this piece surprises me because this is 3/16 steel here and nothing special about it. This stuff, even when the coals in there burning really, really hot, this never gets red. That really surprised me. I thought this would turn cherry red, but it hasn't. And I don't know if it's because there's some airflow behind it or what, but I'm not going to argue with it. Okay, I stuck this in at 10:04, I believe. It's now 10:09. Let's see what it looks like. And there you go. Not hot enough to do much. You could bend it maybe. I see this is be the main problem with the wood fire, is trying to keep enough bed of coals down there to do anything with it. Okay, 10:13, let's see what this looks like. Yeah, it's actually better than I thought it would be for the wood. See if I can get the end of that nice and hot. See if we can maybe hammer it out a little bit. Like I actually know what I'm doing, but we can pretend. And if you're curious what that 5/8 looks like, I don't think the spring steel you could hammer it out, but you could maybe bend it a little bit. So yeah, I think you could actually use this as a wood-fired forge if you had to. Okay, it's almost 10:16. Let's see if we can do anything with this when we get it out. This cools really quick out in this cold air. Well, I started to make a square, so that's something. And this anvil, I left it out overnight, so it's at like 20 degrees too, so you stick hot metal on it, it just sucks the heat right out of that metal. And this stuff, yeah, I don't think you could do much besides bend it a little bit. Trying to draw that out just a little bit. Like I said, that anvil, when it's cold like that, just sucks the heat right out of this. I'm going to leave it in for a few minutes and see how hot we can actually get it. I mean, that's barely hot enough to do anything with it. We'll see if we keep it in there, I don't know, let's say 5-6 minutes and check the time. 10:18. We'll see if we can get it hot enough that we can actually, see if it gets as hot as the coal. I don't think I can get it quite that hot, but we'll see. I went ahead and opened the air up a little bit more on this to really get this thing going. And it seems to have made a big difference. I had it pretty well shut down before because it just seemed like it was burning too fast, but this might be what you have to do with wood. I just don't know. Okay, it's been 5 or so minutes with quite a bit more airflow. It does look like it made a difference, so let's give this a try. and it's also burning the wood up really, really fast. Well, it did get hotter. It doesn't get quite as hot as the coal, it doesn't seem to me. But it's also much more finicky. Okay, I readjusted the wood in there a little bit. We're going to give this one more try. It's been another 5 minutes or so. Okay, let's grab this out, see how hot it is. It's been in there quite a while, and I'm running out of my little wood chunks, so let's see what this looks like. Well, you definitely can forge with it. I was just trying to bring that down to a little bit of a point. It's going to be much slower than the coal, it appears to me. It's a lot messier too. I'm going to go ahead and throw some coal on it, get it burning good. Then we'll reheat it with coal, and I'll show you the difference. Oh, I left that big piece in there. Let's see what it looks like. It's been in there about 10 minutes. Well, you could work that down, but boy, it's going to take a long time. I threw in a little bit of that coal that I'd pulled out earlier. I'll throw a few more hunks on. We're going to give this a little bit for this coal to get going, and then we'll come back and reheat those two pieces and look at the difference between them. So it's been about 10 minutes, and this coal looks like it's just about perfect. We'll throw a couple pieces of metal in, back to this 5/8, and this piece of 3/8. Leave it in for just a little bit, and we'll compare the coal to the wood. Now there's still a little bit of wood burning down in there and on top here, but for the most part the coal has kind of taken over. And currently I don't have a lot of airflow going to this, about half volume. I can go up a little bit. Now that's wide open. You can see it doesn't seem to make a huge amount of difference with this coal. And I can shut it, that's as low as I can go on my setup, and it doesn't make a huge difference. Now if I shut it off, this coal will go pretty much completely out in no time at all without some airflow to it. In fact, that's how I've been putting it out, is just turn the air off, scrape it back just a little bit, and it goes out. So this shouldn't take too long. This has only been in there, what, maybe 30 seconds, a minute? You can already see it's just as red as it was in 5 minutes in the wood fire. I don't know if this is going to be cool enough to grab a hold of. You can see that's already turning red, and that was ice cold just a minute ago. I can tell you what little I know already is I would much prefer to work with the coal over the wood fire. Just that little experiment we just did. This burns so clean. You can see this wood here is putting off a little smoke, but the coal, there's absolutely no smoke coming off of this anthracite coal at all, and it's really hot. World of difference. And the reason I'm making a spike is that's about all I know how to make. So again, it's warmed up some out here. It's probably about 25, 26, but it's still rather cold, so things cool off really quick. See, world of difference. So much hotter than it was in the wood fire, and that was 10 minutes or so in that fire with the wood. Never got anywhere close to this. And at that, you know, you can bend this stuff For those of you who are blacksmiths, don't cringe too much. I'm just trying to figure out what the heck I'm doing. It's still hot enough you can bend it. I don't think I could have done that with the wood fire at all. Now before, I had to let it sit, 5-6 minutes in that wood fire before even the 3/8 I could do anything with it really. At least a couple minutes. This, I put it in and in just 20-30 seconds it's back to this. A little experiment we did with the wood, I went through 2 of those buckets full of wood to get that done. In this, I've went through about 4 scoops that I can hold in my hands like that, and that's not a lot of coal I threw in there. So you can see that the coal burns so much slower, so much hotter, and like I hate to say it again, I have no idea what I'm doing, but so far I'm really enjoying working with this coal. And I don't know what it would be like to work with the actual coal you're supposed to use, but this is what's available to me, so this is what I'm going to use. So you might be asking, what have I made with this thing? Well, honestly, I've only had it operating about maybe a day, and really haven't made much, just been trying to figure out how to forge metal. It's, I've watched a couple of these blacksmith videos from these guys that do it professionally. They make it look so easy. It's not. But I made this little hook yesterday. Was making it for the bathroom to go on for a towel rack to hold several towels. I mean, nothing special, a little curly Q on the end. But, it's pretty rough. I got it a little too hot. Anyway, I made this little guy. Don't know what I'm going to do with it. Probably use it in the shop somewhere. I made several of these just to hang over the edge of the forge. This part hangs in the forge, and then I can hang tools on it. And then, of course, this big 5/8 spring steel. I've got a plan for this to hang some heavy targets on it. So that was actually something worth making. So that's about all we have time for today. Thanks for watching, subscribing, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Again, I have no idea what I'm doing with this blacksmithing thing, but I'm having some fun with it. So we'll see you guys on the next video.